What is up, everybody? It's Luna Ray Wolf Goddess coming at you with the 25th 25th deck profile from the Greenville, South Carolina regionals, featuring my buddy here, Chris Smith. He
Hey, how's it
played
going?
he played a Sychron deck. He is a diehard fan of Yu-Gi-Oh 5Ds, as you can see. Um, why don't
If
you
it's
why don't you
if
give
it's
us
one
a
thing that I'm
little
known for, that's definitely it.
So why don't you give us a little introduction?
All right. Well, for starters, I've played Syncron since I was about 9 years old. So it's incredible that I can take what is my favorite deck and still do this well at major events. A lot of the support that this deck has received in the past couple of years has just been phenomenal. And we're getting even more support next month in Duelist Nexus. And it's incredible to me like how much of a fan favorite Yusei was, and yet nobody knows much of his cards. Like the entire day at the regionals, I had to explain almost every card in my deck, outside of the obvious, commonly played cards. Like most things, people didn't know what did what, and half the cards on my extra deck, people didn't know it even existed. Um, so it's a very unique deck. It definitely takes a very skilled pilot. It's not something that you can just pick up and play immediately. And no two Synchron players will play the deck the same either. Like if I were to change even one card in my extra deck, that changes my entire end board.
Oh yeah, that's
Um,
that's totally
it,
true there. I've tried
yeah,
picking up the
it's
deck myself and it was crazy, but I'm still a huge fan of Yusei from 5Ds.
yeah, this is definitely the kind of deck that you need to pick up and play with it and play with it and play with it and modify it to your personal tastes and personal preferences. Because everybody kind of has a different idea of what they want the deck to do. And so
Gotcha.
this gives you the most creative freedom I can think of any deck. The only thing I can think of that might have more creativity might be Pendulum, or maybe some hero decks. But for creativity, while being locked exclusively into Synchro only, no other deck gives you as much freedom in that regard.
Gotcha. So let's get started with the deck profile.
Yep. So beginning with the main deck, I'm running 41 cards. I know a lot of people are kind of shy against that, but I it when you see how many cards you can draw mid combo, it's never a bad thing.
Oh, I do it myself.
Um,
I
yeah.
run
So
41 cards and people hate me for it.
mhm. Yeah. A lot of times I play this deck at 45 cards even, just because
Well,
again there are several combos where you can draw 8 to 11 cards. So having the additional resources in the deck available sometimes come up. Um, but without further ado, we're going to start with the monsters. We're going to have 3 copies of Stardust Synchron. This was one of the most important pieces that we received in Dawn of Majesty.
oh,
If you don't know this, if
one
you
of
don't
the
know what this
best
guy does,
starters, if I'm correct, right?
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One of the best starters for the deck, if I'm right.
For the most part, yes. In a pure build, this is definitely one of the best cards for the deck. It's more so, it's better a midpoint extender, but you can use it as a starter. It's just you don't want to just in my build, just because I'm currently running the adventure package. So you don't want to start with this unless you absolutely have to. But
Gotcha.
in a pure build, this is a very good starter.
Gotcha.
And as I was going to say, if you don't know what this card does, on normal or special summon, it searches for any spell or trap that mentions Stardust Dragon. And then it has a second effect. In your hand or in your graveyard, you can tribute one monster you control as cost to attempt to special summon it, but it's banished whenever it leaves the field. And if you use that second effect, it will lock you into Synchro only.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people don't even realize that restriction that it has. But being able to just bring it back out of the graveyard or out of your hand sometimes, that's very handy. Um,
Understandable.
the next piece, I'm only playing 1 copy of Satellite Synchron. After Battles of Legend Monsters Revenge, I will be swapping this for 1 to 2 copies of Assault Synchron. Not sure on the exact ratio, but at the bare minimum, I'll be playing at least one. And that's not to say Satellite Synchron is bad by any means. It's just Assault Synchron is just that much better. What Satellite Synchron does is if it's in your hand, If you revive a monster out of your graveyard, you can special summon it out of your hand.
Oh,
And then,
wow.
and if you control a synchro monster that is either a Sychron, Warrior, or Stardust in name, you can optionally double its level on the field. I'm sorry, double the level of Satellite Synchron to be precise.
Oh, wow.
So I will say Assault Synchron. That is one thing that Satellite has over Assault is sometimes that level modulation does come up, but it's not enough that it's worth running this over Assault. But if you
Gotcha.
can't afford Assault, this is still very, very good. Um, for this build, this is going to be your most important Synchron here. We're running 3 copies of Jet.
Yeah.
In this particular build, I would argue Jet is the most important one. It's the best starter and extender for this deck, just because again you're under the adventure package, so a normal summon that has no effect is beneficial. Everybody should know what Jet Synchron does after all the Hulk shenanigans, but just in case you don't, if it's in the graveyard, you can send 1 card from your hand to the graveyard to special summon it, but it's banished whenever it leaves the field. But also the second effect that nobody knows it does have is that if it's sent to the graveyard as synchro material, you can just search for any junk monster. So you could search Junk Synchron, Junk Converter, or other cards in a pure build.
Oh, wow.
And that's the kind of effect that you would only see used in its own deck. The only downside to Jet is that you only get 1 effect per turn and only once that turn, so you can't get both. You get one or the other.
Gotcha.
But that's still a pretty nice little piece of utility. On to the next piece here, we're gonna have 3 copies of Water Enchantress. This should go without saying just because of the adventure package. You can banish her from your hand or graveyard to search for Rite of Vermisier, and if you control the token, you can special summon her. And I believe she also has an effect to search for a field spell that mentions the token. But that effect pretty much only ever comes up in a pure adventure deck, which pretty much nobody plays.
Yeah, because the
Um,
stuff just did come out of Battles of Legend Monsters of Revenge, if I stand
correct.
corrected.
Correct. Yes. And the cool thing about Enchantress is that if you have Jet and Right, you basically have full combo. And I'll get into that a little bit more later. Uh, the next little package we're going to be running is a very small engine. We're going to be playing a very small Magician Souls package with 2 Illusion and 1 Souls. I know most decks that run Magician Souls tend to play 2 and 2. But for this deck, I actually kind of prefer 2 and 1, just because again, just because of how many cards you're drawing, and with Herald of the Arclight, you have access to illusion very, very easily. So it's a lot of times in side decking, I'll even cut 1 illusion down in side decking, just because you can get to this whenever you want it. But we're just playing this as a small 3 card engine, just to facilitate some draws. It's a level 1 non-tuner. You can even bait an Ash, just because people don't like if you open with Illusion, people might not know what you're on yet, and they might just think you're on Dark Magician, and they'll just go ahead and whiff an Ash on that. Um, but this is a very, very good package, and also the Illusion. A lot of people don't realize that its effect to reveal itself to search for the souls. It doesn't have to put itself on top of the deck. You can put any card from your hand on top of the deck. So there is 1 Garnet in this deck actually, and this can actually help you get that Garnet back into the deck to make it useful. So a
Gotcha.
little fun fact there. The next, this is gonna be the only monster hand trap. We're just playing 3 copies of Ash. Branded is the deck. I'm pretty sure there's not much else that needs to be said about that.
Yeah, Branded is a deck I should know. I've played against it multiple times, and
Mm-hmm.
if you can get them to play their Branded Fusion and Ash that, they're
Yeah, that's if you Ash the Branded Fusion. Now I know they now have a Nader Servant play, but it's not as good. But 9 times out of 10, Ash on Brand Fusion, and that's just GG's right there.
yeah,
They will almost
basically.
always just concede right then and there. But on to the next couple of monsters. This is going to be all of the one-ofs. So we have 1 copy of Stardust Trail. This is to partner with your Stardust Synchron. 1 copy of the Griffin Rider, which that should go without saying just because of the adventure package.
Exactly.
Um, this is an interesting tech choice. I'm using this as a small world bridge. I'm playing 1 copy of Dogaran, the Mad Flame Kaiju.
Ah,
And I can kind of explain that in depth a little bit more later. And then the one garnet is our copy of Mare.
Ooh.
Um, I hate seeing this card. It stays in my hand constantly. However, this is a very necessary garnet just because it allows you to essentially full combo through Nibiru like nothing ever happened. Or there are several combos where you can utilize this to just continue drawing more and more cards.
Gotcha.
So I mean, it's an evil, but it's a necessary one at that. Moving on to the spells, the one that I had to repeat myself explaining the most during the regionals, we're playing 3 copies of Synchro Overtake. To oversimplify, it's basically fusion deployment, but for synchro. Um, it allows you to reveal a synchro monster in your extra deck, then either add to your hand or special summon from either your deck or your graveyard any specific material listed on that synchro monster.
Oh wow.
So, for example, I can reveal Jet Warrior to add or special Jet Synchron. You could reveal Junk Warrior for Junk Synchron. Doomkaiser Dragon for Plague Spreader Zombie, so on and so forth. And then if you use this, it will lock you into Synchro only for the entire turn.
Gotcha.
And it's one of the few cards in the deck that actually says you can only activate one per turn instead of only use. So if your opponent hits you with a Ghost Bell, since Ghost Bell negates the activation, if you have a second copy of Overtake, you can just go ahead and reactivate it.
I did not
Well,
know that. That's
it's
actually
just one of those ruling things that not many people know of. So it's just really handy to know. But I cannot tell you how many times I had to explain this card during regionals. Nobody knew what it did. Even if you say it's a fusion deployment, but for synchro, they still don't know what that means sometimes, and that's mind-boggling to me.
yeah, because like everybody says, some Yu-Gi-Oh players don't like to read the cards.
Yeah, no kidding. And this is pretty much the only deck that can really make use of this. I know Deep Sea Diva can be searched off of it, so I feel like there could be some water synchro shenanigans going on there, but I have yet to see those. Again, I know you can reveal Doomkaiser for Plague Spreader, but I think, as far as I'm aware, I think Sychron is the only deck that actually makes use of that.
Okay.
And I think it's just because of the synchro locking restriction, and that may prevent Mermail from doing anything because I know they like their Xyz plays. But I digress.
Okay.
If my deck's the one that's playing it, then so be it. On to the next piece here, we're gonna have 3 copies of Rite of Aramesir. Again, playing the adventure package should be pretty self-explanatory. It generates a token and it places Fateful Adventure from your deck onto the field. Um, the next thing here, we're playing 3 copies of Small World. Now, if you want to play my version of this deck at 40 instead of 41, you could just cut the third one and just play 2 Small World. I was playing 3 just because I simply wanted to. Alternative, there is another card that I'll get to in just a moment that you can also just completely cut if you wanted to and keep Small World at 3. And this is one of those just absolute big brain cards that, as long as you have the correct bridge, you can search anything in the game with this.
Okay.
And there's absolutely no cost to Small World either. So if you activate it and they ash it, you don't have to reveal anything.
Okay.
And I'll use this with, say, Jet and Dogaran to get to Water Enchantress, or Ash and Dogaran for Enchantress. You could do Jet then Satellite to get Stardust Synchron, or vice versa. You can't do that with Assault Synchron, unfortunately, because it has 0 defense, and that kind of messes things up. So that is one advantage that Satellite has over Assault, as well as just using it as a small world bridge.
Okay.
But again, that's just personal preference. I was playing Tuning in place of originally, and then I decided to swap it for Small World and the Dogaran. Look, I do have the playset of the ulti tunings, and those were these have been a long time favorite of mine. But I think Small World just works better for this build. But in a pure one, I would still stick with tuning.
Okay. I can totally understand
Um,
that.
yeah, and the next little small package for Actually, I wouldn't say small bag. Just the next pair of spells, we're gonna have 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talent. Um, I have a love-hate relationship with this card because every time I see it in my hand, I always have both copies every time.
Oh,
It always clogs me. So I never play it any higher than 2.
that's gotta suck.
Uh, and the majority of the time, whenever I do have it in my hand, I hardly ever get to actually resolve it as well. So it's like every time I see it, I always wish it was something else. But that one random 1 in 10 times that I actually do get to resolve it, I will almost always win that game.
And
Then to partner with these, I was playing 1 copy of Thrust. And you can play with these ratios some. You could play 2 thrusts and 1 talent, which I may very well switch to from here on outwards. I'm still trying to decide what ratio I like for these. But I would argue that going second, talents is the one you'd prefer to see over thrust. But I can see an argument for either one. You could play 2 and 2 if you wanted to. You could play 2 thrusts, 1 talent, 2 talents, 1 thrust, or even just 3 talents and no thrust. That is entirely up to personal preference. But the 2 talents and the 1 thrust just seem to work wonders for me in the regionals.
that's good. Except for the
Then
clogging
finally
of
for
it
the
in your hand.
yeah, and then for the next few spells, the next 6 are all gonna be one ofs. So I'm gonna start with the first 3 are pretty much gonna be engine pieces. You have 1 Stardust Illumination. This is the target that you search off of Stardust Synchron. Then you have your Draco back and your Fateful Adventure. These are for the adventure package.
Gotcha.
Um, and then I guess you could probably call this first one engine piece, although it's really not. We've got Foolish Burial, which is basically your 4th copy of Enchantress, your 4th copy of Jet, or I'm sorry, 7th copy of Jet. There's plenty of things you like to Foolish. Um, I was main decking 1 Feather Duster for the regional. If you want to play 40 cards and keep Small World at 3, you can absolutely just cut this card. But main decking that just came in so clutch against the one Sky Striker player that I played against, and then there was a Sky Striker Pearly player that I played against.
Oh
And
wow.
in both of those matchups, in game 1 for both of those, I lost the die roll, and I just happened to top deck this both times, and
That's
that alone
phenomenal.
won me the game. And the final spell we're playing in the one of is Called By, which should be pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Called By is Called By.
Called by is called by because it helps get rid of that pesky ash blossom if you
So
have.
funny enough, Ash essentially does nothing to this deck outside of Ash on Enchantress. That's
Yeah.
the only time Ash really hurts you, unless your hand is just that bad. And then, but finally for the last 3 cards, we're just playing 3 copies of Imperm. Um,
That
Again, this should
that
be pretty
one's a
self-explanatory.
no-brainer right
Yeah,
there.
that should be a no-brainer. In a pure build for Synchron, I actually tend to main Effect Veiler over Ash, just because the synergy that Effect Veiler has with Junk Synchron.
Oh yeah, because
Uh,
of it being a tuner.
mhm. Well, that and just something being a level 2 or low that you can revive, you can use that to get Doppelwarrior out of your hand.
That
And that's
too.
what I find so incredible about this adventure variant of the deck is that this deck can do full combo without Doppelwarrior, and in fact doesn't even miss Doppelwarrior, and I find that incredible.
That is
Uh,
awesome.
Moving on to the extra deck, we're gonna start in order by levels. So this one should be familiar to most people. We're playing 1 Formula Synchron. Just on summon, you get to draw 1, and it's a quick effect to synchro summon on the opponent's turn. Next, we have 1 copy of Martial Metal Marcher. It's a tuner, and on summon, it can revive any tuner from your graveyard, but its effects are negated.
Ah.
And then anything that uses any synchro monster that uses it as a tuner also becomes a tuner.
Oh wow.
It's just more of an extender than anything. Um, but I would argue in an adventure build you could probably cut this. You could maybe make a flex spot out of it, but the few times that you do need to make this are very important.
Understandable.
So I mean, I play it, but I mean, doesn't mean that you have to per se. The next is going to be our level 4. We have a copy of Herald of the Arclight. Um, with Jet and Enchantress or Jet and Right, there are many times that you can make Herald of the Arclight on fourth summon
Oh,
or third summon even.
oh wow.
So you can just play completely protected from just about anything.
Even Nib.
Correct. And even if you don't have the Herald, if you play the Mare, and another card I'll get to here in a minute, you can play past Nibiru like nothing happened. Um, but our next card here is going to be our Synchro Overtake target. This is going to be Jet Warrior. You can just reveal this to add or summon Jet Synchron. But it also has good utility as well, because on Synchro Summon, you can just target one card your opponent controls and bounce it back to their hand. And it has a second effect that if it's in the graveyard, you can tribute a level 2 or lower monster you control to special summon it back in defense position, but banish it whenever it leaves the field.
Oh wow.
But that bounce effect comes up quite a lot going second.
Yeah, it really does because bouncing a card back to your opponent's hand, it it could literally make or break their deck.
Absolutely. And like I said, and being able to make this off of there is a combo with Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon where you can set this up on the opponent's turn as well. But there's actually a better boss monster for that play as well.
Okay.
But I currently took that out for a different card, and I'll get to that here in just a moment. I know I've been saying that a lot. The next level 5 we have is one copy of Excel Synchron. Um, it doesn't do anything on summon, but if you activate its effect, you can send for cost any Synchron monster in your deck to the graveyard to either increase or decrease its level by the level of the monster that you send. So, for example, if you send Stardust Synchron, you can just make this guy a level 9 or drop him down to a level 1.
Ooh,
And again, it sends for cost, so it can't be ashed.
that's good.
So even if you get Veiled or Impermed on that, you're still able to send Stardust Synchron to have a follow up. You're still able to send Jet Synchron and just bring it right back. And a lot of people were blindsided by that. And then
Ah,
he also has a second effect that it's identical to Formula Synchron. You can just quick effect to synchron the opponent's turn.
everybody remembers that from you say doing that way too much in the anime.
Yeah, doing that a lot for Shooting Star Dragon.
Oh God, yes.
The next level 5, I would argue, is probably the second most important level 5 in the deck, or in the extra deck, should I say? And that is the TG Hyper Librarian. This card is absolutely busted. Every single time you Synchro Summon, you get to draw one card, and that is not once per turn, nor is it once per chain either.
Oh wow.
So again, when I say that this deck has a combo that you can draw 11 cards, I'm really not kidding. There is a specific combo line where you can draw 11 cards and end on 3 negates, while also ripping 2 cards out of your opponent's hand.
Wow.
Um, so I mean it's quite a powerful card. Up next is our win condition, and is the MVP of the extra deck. We have one copy of Junk Speeder.
Ah.
I had to explain this card all day at regionals. Again, a lot of people didn't know this card existed. I kid you not, one guy even called a judge on me to just confirm with the judge to make sure that this was an actual real card because he thought it was a custom card just because of its effect. And I can understand why. It's very broken, but it's
Oh.
also very fair just because it has no protection. On Synchro Summon, it can summon as many Synchron tuners from your deck as possible with different levels in defense position, with all of their effects and everything. However, you're locked into Synchro only for the entire turn, even before you make Speeder. If you summon a monster from the extra deck that's not a Synchro before you even attempt to bring him out, you just cannot use that effect at all.
Oh wow.
It's just one of those cards where it's worded for the entire turn, not just after it resolves. And then it has a second effect that catches a lot of people off guard, where during the turn it is synchro summoned. When it declares an attack, it's either when it declares an attack or on battle on damage calculation. I can't remember off the top of my head. But on the turn it's synchro summoned, you can double its attack from 18 up to 36. And there are a lot of times that people just don't realize it does that, and you can just beat over things and then go main phase 2 and then pop off.
So basically, in a sense, it's basically a synchro version of Speed Warrior in a sense.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, even if you look at the artwork of it, I mean, it's basically just Speed Warrior reimagined. Up next, we have our one level 6. We have Stardust Charge Warrior. On summon, it lets you draw one card. But it also has a second effect that not many people realize is that it can attack everything your opponent controls once each. Granted, it only has 2,000, but there are other variants of this deck, or there's other cards that you can swap in and out to actually bump this guy up even bigger. But against like Sprite, for example, this thing just can clear a board by itself.
Oh wow.
It's a very funny OTK option going second.
Gotcha.
Here's the random one of that I teched in place of the opposite one that I mentioned earlier compared to Jet Warrior's effect. I decided to play Shooting Riser Dragon because there is a combo line. Granted, that one does die to Nibiru, and that combo line lets you make Stardust Synchron and Rite of Air into full combo. If you don't play Shooting Riser Dragon, then Stardust Synchron and Rite of Air is kind of a brick, or a soft brick, but this kind of fixes that.
Okay.
But you don't have to play this. Like that, if you like to just play through what you have, you can absolutely cut this out for something like Satellite Warrior, which is an absolutely broken card. Like I said, I took it out for this, but I'm probably gonna go back to Satellite Warrior. Haven't made my mind up yet. Because Satellite Warrior is just a free win against back row decks. Up next is our next level 7. This is what makes the Mare worth it. We are playing one copy of Yazi. Um,
Oh.
and you can either use its effect targeting itself and another card to pop it and then summon Mare from the deck. Or you can even go mid combo. You can just make Baron de Fleur and then have the Baron pop Yazi, and that will still trigger Yazi to summon from the deck.
Wow.
And there are many, many combo lines off of that. This card alone makes that Garnet worth it.
That which is a good thing in the sense.
Yes, this is what lets you play past Nibiru. Up next, we have our first level 8. We have one copy of Psyframe Lord Omega. This thing is kind of it's funny because I used to hate this card. So I used to prefer like a hard made Crystal Wing or something else instead. However, now that Bestial Dispatter exists, this card is just absolutely dumb. And it's kind of an MVP now.
Oh yeah, it is.
We're playing one copy of the original Stardust Dragon.
Oh, is that a Ghostware I see?
It is.
Wow.
I've had this card since I was a kid as well. It
Wow.
has seen better days, but I can't be mad about it because I've had it since I was little, so I cannot complain.
And that's totally understandable on
Uh,
that.
and the reason we're playing the Stardust is because we are on the XL Synchro Stardust Dragon. This card is I know a lot of people tend to play this in super heavy and similar decks like Monodium. It's just on Synchro Summon, you can non-targeting revive a level 2 or lower tuner in your graveyard with all of its effects. And then it has a second effect, and it is a quick effect. You can tribute it for cost to summon the original Stardust Dragon from your extra deck, and that is treated as a Synchro Summon. And then in the same effect, you can immediately Synchro Summon again using cards you control on the field.
Oh wow.
And the funny thing is, both of the monsters summoned by that effect are unaffected by your opponent's activated effects until the end of the turn.
Oh
So
wow.
if you summon Stardust Dragon and Synchro Summon something else and leave the Stardust on board, both the Stardust and the monster you summon are both unaffected.
That is actually not bad.
And again, I had judge calls on that as well because people did not believe it made both unaffected. They thought it only made the second one unaffected. But it does say monsters summoned by this effect. And then finally, we have our last two pieces here, our two level 2s. We have, as I kind of teased with the Omega, we have one copy of Bestial Dispatter, or Dispater, I'm not sure how you pronounce it. This is a pretty new card. You can target any light or dark monster that either player owns as long as it's banished. You can target any banished light or dark monster and summon it to your side of the field with all the effects and everything.
Wow.
And then its second effect is if your opponent activates a monster effect, regardless of location, you can target either an opponent's banished card or your own banished card and shuffle it into the deck. If you shuffle your opponent's card back into the deck, you negate that monster. But if you shuffle yours back into the deck, you destroy that monster. So you either negate or destroy, but not both.
Oh wow.
So sometimes that can matter as well.
That's broken right there.
Again, when you pair that with Omega to just hand rip twice, that's very busted.
Oh,
And then our last level 10 is obviously the Baron de Fleur.
that card has gotten on my nerves so many times. I've had to work through the negate just in order to destroy it.
Oh yeah, and it's just one of those cards that like forces you to interact with it. And in this deck, a lot you can actually make use of the second or the third effect on either player's standby phase to shuffle it back into the extra deck and revive any level 9 or lower monster from your graveyard. In this deck, you can simply if you have a level 8 on board, you can simply just go and revive Formula Synchron and then just remake it once you've used the negate.
Oh wow.
So this deck has very plentiful ways to replenish that.
Wow. That's not a bad extra deck there though.
Yeah, that's pretty standard for this deck, honestly. Um,
I do have a question for you.
Absolutely, go ahead.
So had during the regionals, did you get debarriered any time at all?
Not once actually. For the longest time, if leading up to the regional, I was actually planning on side decking, Sychron or Epsilon. A lot of people don't know what that is, and they never anticipate it. It's literally Gamma, but for traps. But not once did I get debarriered. I did get anti-spelled, but not once did I get debarriered at all.
Oh wow.
And that was surprising to me. Like I really thought I was gonna get hit with that.
Yeah, because D barrier would basically stop you from synchro summoning right there.
Exactly. And see, ordinarily in any other scenario, against any other deck such as Dragon Link, um, well, I guess maybe not branded, but like against like say Dragon Link, um, sometimes Sword Soul, or any deck that has multiple summon mechanics, they'll usually wait until it looks like you're committing to one line before they debarrier. But when you have a deck like this that they see that everything you do locks you into synchro only, they're almost always going to shotgun the debarrier in the draw phase or standby phase.
Yeah.
And I've caught people off guard at locals with Epsilon. And I'm half tempted to side it in during the WCQ, but I haven't made my mind up yet because no one ever anticipates that. In fact, my side deck actually had a fair amount of or a small amount of things specifically for Labyrinth, and I didn't play a single Labyrinth player. So
Wow.
I would say I got lucky in that regard.
Yeah, you did.
And speaking of side deck, we'll just go ahead and start on that now. The only three monsters I'm playing, uh, excuse me, I was playing two Magnamut and one Druisworm.
Oh, gotta have the
Uh, I
Bastille
know
package there.
I know most people play three Magnamut and one Druisworm, but with as many cards as this deck draws, I like keeping it kind of simple. Um, and every single time I sided these in, I saw these, and these won me games all by themselves.
Oh wow.
Uh, this came up every Sprite player that I played. This came up against the Pearly player. It came up against both of the Dragon Link matchups I had. These cards won me games all by themselves.
Wow.
Hands down. Just because being a level 6, even if your opponent doesn't have a light or dark, you can just hit your own light or dark, summon it, normal Stardust Synchron, and you just have a free Baron right there.
Yeah.
Then moving on, we have a few spells. We have a playset of Dark Ruler. This was primarily for dinosaurs. just because I have a very, very bad track record against dinos.
Oh
I
yeah.
hate this deck. I hate that deck with a burning passion.
Ultimate
Um,
Conductor Tyranno is a card that will hurt you, and if you can Dark Ruler the UC the Ultimate Conductor Tyranno, they can not shotgun the effect, which is amazing.
yeah, but now they have Dinglong back, they can out the Dark Ruler now. But
Oh,
at the same time, Dark Ruler is never a bad card to side deck.
that is true.
And these were some of the cards I sided for Labyrinth. I was playing Triple Cosmic Cyclone. Actually, the entire event, I never sided these in. I might swap these for something else, or I might keep them in for the WCQ. I haven't made my mind up yet. But during the entire regionals, I did not side these in whatsoever.
Wow. Because,
And
like
like
you
I, said,
said, there
I
were
I really thought I would have needed it for Labyrinth.
yeah, because like you said, you didn't even play against one Labyrinth player at all.
Yeah, no kidding. That's so I got really lucky in that regard. And again, this is for a mixture of Labyrinth and combo decks. Just three evenly matched. I have a feeling like that's pretty much like a standard side deck staple.
Yeah,
Like nearly every side deck these days seems to run evenly.
yeah, because with it being reprinted in one of the structure decks, everybody's been running evenly, and it's a go-to card.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. And then this next card here is one that again people thought was a custom card, but will win you games simply because you activated it. This is basically this deck's equivalent to Eradicator Epidemic Virus,
Oh,
um, and that is Gravity Collapse.
oh, what does that do actually?
So funny enough, this is a counter trap, by the way, but it's when your opponent would summon a monster, you can send one face-up synchro monster you control to the graveyard to negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster, and if you do, until the end of the turn, your opponent cannot summon a monster. Period.
Oh wow.
Like that is legitimately what it says. I'm not sure if you can see that in the camera at all.
Um,
Um, it says you can activate by sending one face-up synchro monster you control to the graveyard when your opponent summons a monster. Negate the summon and destroy that card. Your opponent cannot summon a monster until the end phase of this turn. So
if
I
I
mean, their entire turn is basically getting skipped.
oh wow, if I have to, I'll put the effect in the corner for gravity
Oh yeah, yeah.
collapse, so people can see what it does. That
Yeah, this is one of those cards that like nobody knows exists, but this is essentially just about the only deck that can reliably play it. I mean, Sword Soul can to an extent, but not to the extent that this deck can. Like it's almost worth main decking in this deck if it weren't for the fact that you can brick on it.
oh yeah, and it lets you send one of your face up synchro monsters you control to the graveyard
Hmm.
to negate the summon.
But yeah, this is like my insurance for game three. Like if like game three, if I know that I'm going to choose to go first, I'm gonna side this in every single time.
Oh, that is a definite thing.
Some changes I might make to the side deck, just because Thrust can search evenly and Dark Ruler. What I might do is I might take out the third Cyclone, especially since I've only got the two CRs, so I kind of want them all to match instead of this one random secret. I might play a second Thrust in the side deck, and then just side it in going second, just because that means I could have 5 copies of Evenly or 5 copies of Dark Ruler.
Yeah, that is true because Dark Ruler is a card.
Alternatively, if I was maining 2 thrusts, I'd probably cut one Dark Ruler and one Evenly, and just side deck 2 other cards, or maybe cut the Cosmic down to 2, and just side a playset of something.
Yeah,
So I mean, this deck has some flexibility to it.
yeah.
Like I said, and by no means this is by no means the definitive side deck. Um, but this is what worked well for me. In fact, the Bestials were a last minute decision. Originally, I was gonna play Ghost Bell, And then I got to thinking about it like the night before, and I was like, well, yes, Ghost Bell does things against Labyrinth and it does things against Branded, but at the same time, Bystials also do pretty much the same thing against both those decks. And at the same time, it gives me a free body as well.
Yeah, it
So
does
having that
actually.
body in a deck that likes to synchro summon and generally has a hard time getting non-tuners onto the board, I felt like that was the way to go, and I could not have been happier. Again, I cannot tell you how many games these Bystials alone won me. I would say 3 out of 4 games for me, I won just because I had these in my side deck.
And that's not bad.
I could not be mad about that in the slightest.
So, uh, with that being said, uh, because I know you probably wanted to show off combos, but uh,
I mean,
getting
it is entirely up to you. Like if you want to, I'm sure if you don't want to, you can probably edit this part out. 'Cause I know we're just kind of having a discussion here now.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I mean, if you want me to do a combo, I've got no problem doing that. I can streamline it. But it's entirely up to you.
nah.
All right.
But with that being said, that is the deck profile for the 25th place Greenville, South Carolina Regionals deck profile with my buddy Chris. Um, d- don't forget to hit that subscribe button, ding the notification bell, and with that, this is Luna signing off.
Thanks again for having me.